Hi guys, welcome back to this week's video. Sorry I haven't posted on this channel for the longest time. I've been quite busy and I didn't want to film a video on this channel haphazardly. I wanted to do it properly, so I hope you don't mind, but I thought it would be nice to kick off coming back to this channel, different type of video, more fun video. Thought I would show you some of the kind of books that I've been reading lately. As you can tell from the background, I really enjoy reading, so I thought you guys would find this helpful. And the first thing that I want to talk about is the Looking for Alaska by John Green. John Green is one of the most well-known writers that have come out of 2014, and for good reason. This book is incredible. I love the way he captures the emotions of the characters. I think that's something that he does really well. The book itself follows Alaska and her group of friends who all reside in this kind of boarding school. It's really interesting to see how all these characters are kind of fascinated by this one person and the effect that this person has on them, and it looks at how teenagers kind of grow up and how they have to cope with life's difficulties. Again, that's something that John Green does really well, and it does a really good job at tackling a subject like grief and how teenagers especially deal with grief. I really enjoy this. I enjoy this more than The Fault in Our Stars as well, so if you enjoyed that, I would definitely give this a read. Next book that I wanted to talk about is the Inferno Devices book 1 called Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. I really enjoy this book. It was about a girl called Tessa who thinks she's just a regular kind of everyday girl just like you and me, and she finds out that she's part of this supernatural world that involves zombies and demons and the underworld and good versus evil, and she's not quite sure who to trust, where she fits in, why she should trust the people that have asked her to trust her. And amongst all that, there's this kind of love triangle going on between her and two of the other characters, and that is something usually good at working out in books, but I can't really work out which way she's going to go in this book. It's quite difficult to read. I have not read the second book of this yet, but I read the preview that they had at the end of this book, and I'm really intrigued because it sounds like it's something that I need to get my hands on as soon as possible. I wanted to get through the books I had in my house before I bought any new ones, so I haven't read that yet, but that is on my list to read. It did take a while for me to get into it. The first couple of chapters were kind of setting the scene, so it took me a while, but once I got in it, I didn't stop reading it, and I really enjoyed this book. The second book that I want to talk about is a two-parter, and it's Geek Girl by the author Holly Smale. And I haven't heard of Holly Smale before, but I've heard of the books. And the first one is just called Geek Girl, and the second one is called Geek Girl Model Misfits. And I really enjoyed reading this. It was a really nice, light-hearted kind of book, kind of to get you in that feel-good, happy mood. It isn't something that you read and you cry at because it's heartbreaking. It does the opposite. It makes you laugh. It follows Harriet's Mathers, as I explained, and she's basically this girl who is an A-star student who loves learning in school, doesn't necessarily fit in with the popular kids, but she's thrust into this world that a lot of the popular kids would love. I'm not going to talk about that too much because you've probably already guessed it's to do with fashion, but it talks about her journey, her personal journey in finding herself, and it's a really clever way of looking at conformism, I think, because it kind of tells you don't have to be a stereotypical person. You can still enjoy education but still love something as fashion, which a lot of people are scared to do. And the other reason I really like this is because of the clumsiness that Harriet has in her. I fell in love with Harriet and her clumsiness because it reminds me a lot of me. I'm naturally a quite clumsy person, and a lot of the things that she did I laughed at because I could imagine myself doing them, and it's quite funny to see it and hear about it on paper. It's definitely one to read if you like something that is full of jokes as well as has a little bit of a kind of love story in it and has a little bit of fashion in it as well. The next books I want to talk about is a series, and it's the Bluebird series by Melissa Cruz. The first one is Bluebloods and the second one is called Masquerade. I want to talk about them differently because I experienced different feelings for both. I'm going to talk about Bluebloods first. It's the first one and it's about the world of vampires. Think Gossip Girl meets True Blood. Nothing like Twilight, nothing at all like that. It's very much the old school kind of Buffy Vampire Slayer, Angel kind of world of vampires, which is why I really liked it. I like that kind of version of vampires more so than the Twilight version. And this book itself actually took me a while to get into. I'm not sure if it's just because I started it when I was at work, so I only had about 10 minutes in my break to read it and then get stuck into it. But there's a lot of information to take in it because she sets the scene for the other two books in the series, because vampire history, if you are into that kind of thing, I know it doesn't really exist, but if you're into kind of that vampire books, it's because it lasts for so long, it takes a long time to kind of sink in and it's a bit confusing, but she does a really good job at getting it across and bringing it into the 21st century. It follows a girl called Shula, I think that's how you pronounce her name, who's kind of thrust into this world when she moves in with her grandmother and starts a new school. And she basically finds out that she's a vampire and she's surrounded by vampires and she's in this world that she doesn't really want. And the more you delve in it, the more it evolves into a murder story and how a whole group of people can be wiped out. Again, I don't want to give too much away, so that's all I'm going to say about this book. It's set in New York, which is why I said it's all about kind of Gossip Girl kind of meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because it's a lot to do with the rich people in New York and it mixes their lives in the modern times with lives that they would have had in the 60s and 70s, and there's a lot of crossover in between times. It is a complicated read. It is a book that will make you think, not one for a kind of light reading, but if you like a good heavy book, which I do occasionally, this is definitely one to read. The second one, Masquerade, was a lot more easier to get into because by the time Blueblood's finished, she had set the story. It kind of confirmed everything that you were guessing that was going to happen, and the characters are a lot more developed, and I flew by this book. I think I finished it in like a week or so with just reading it at work on my break. And again, this is something that I really enjoyed reading. I love the detail of the cover on this one. I love the mask, and yeah, again, it goes deeper into the characters. It shows the twisted world of vampires, and that's all I can really say about it without giving the story away too much. You don't find out too much in terms of it's a who done it and who is it type of scenario, and you know when closer to finding out who it is at the end of the book as you are at the beginning of the book, and that really intrigues me. I'm currently reading the third part of this and I'm still trying to guess at who the person is, and I'm usually like to think I'm quite good at working stuff like that out, or at least having a guess, but Melissa Cruz has done a really good job at ensuring that we don't. Apparently she's written other books along the same lines of this, so I might actually give her books another go because she's a really good writer. It's wonderfully written and she sets the scene for the stories incredibly well as well. So yeah, that's another book I've been loving. And one of the kind of more self-help books I've been reading is GirlBoss by Sophia Amouruso. And if you like biographies or if you like books about inspiring people, you'll definitely love this. Sophia Amouruso is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Nasty Gal, which is a really big American clothing store, and she does ship internationally, I think, as well, so I'll leave the link to the website down below. But she basically started off as an eBay shop and she now owns a multi-million corporation, and it does talk about that, but not in the way you would expect. It's a lot more real and a little bit more raw. It's kind of like you've got to work your butt off to get to where you are. I did, and this is why I did it, and these are the things that motivated me, and if I can do it, you can do it. Basically, whenever I read this, I was just knew I needed to do something with it. I knew that it gave me the motivation to go into work and to do well in my career and all that kind of stuff. It's a really good, uplifting book. It's really good if you're a graduate and kind of in your early 20s, trying to figure out your way, trying to figure out what you want to do, and realising that you don't always have it put together, but in the end, if you work hard and if you have an idea of what you want and strive to achieve it and work hard to achieve it, it will come. She basically lived and breathed for Nasty Girl for at least 2 years while she was setting it up, and she pretty much still does. And it just talks about how she had to overcome a lot of things. For example, she's an introvert, and how she had to cope with being around people and being around kind of meetings and being taken seriously in the business world as well. And definitely a really good inspiration to me. And the kind of last books that I want to talk about are my last books because they're my favourite, and it's the Divergent series. And I would say this is probably what got me back into being able to constantly read, because I read all 3 in less than a month, and that is not an exaggeration at all. I had watched the film before I read the books. I didn't really have time to read the books before the film, but I really wanted to watch the film. The film is now on DVD, by the way, so if you still want to watch the film, then I would definitely watch it. And they are just as wonderful as the film. Veronica Roth is an incredible writer. I love the way she describes the dystopian world that the books are set in. If you haven't heard of Divergent yet, or if you don't know much about the books, it's basically a world which has different fractions in it, kind of similar to the Hunger Games in that sense, but each fraction has a different quality that they have to hold. For example, one of the fractions is all about being kind, whereas the other one is all about being honest, and the other one is all about protection, that sort of thing. And it tells you how you have to conform to each of those. And it's basically a really interesting way of looking at society and how society could have easily become if we just concentrated on being one thing, and how we as humans can't just be defined by one thing. We need to have loads of different qualities within ourselves. For example, one person is not just kind, they can be hardworking, they can be brave, they can be honest, rather than just being simply kind. And it follows the girl called Tris, who on her 16th birthday gets to decide what type of person she wants to become, and who really knows what you want to become at 16. And it talks about how she finds out she's a bit different compared to all the others, and she has to kind of learn to keep it hidden, because there are some people who want to ruin that and who want people to conform to this kind of dystopian world that they're in. And I'm not going to spoil too much of the story. There is a little bit of a love story in here, but the book is so much more than that, and I can't even explain how wonderful it is without spoiling the story too much, because I really want to. Veronica Roth makes you fall in love with Trish, makes you fall in love with the main character Paul, and kind of their relationship, as well as the friendship that she shares with a lot of the others. It talks a lot about trust and who she can trust and why she can't trust certain people and why she can trust others. And I have really, really enjoyed this. As soon as I finished Divergent, I had to read the first chapter of Insurgent before I went to bed. And I'm usually a person who goes into bed at 10:30. I was up till like 12 o'clock some night reading this, and then reading the next chapter before I could go to sleep, because my mind just wouldn't let me turn off. I needed to figure out what was happening next. And now I'm going to stop talking, because this video is, I think, 16 minutes long without the editing. So I'm going to keep it going. If you like these kind of reviews and you want to know more about the different books that I'm reading, let me know. I'll make sure they're a lot more shorter and kind of more individual books. That's kind of better for you to get a quick review on. Let me know in the description down below, and I shall see you next week. Bye!